Good afternoon, everybody. You know me, Leoni Hodgson, and my talk is about Gautama Buddha and the concept no God, no soul. And I'm sure there are many people in the audience just like me. When we first came across that concept, it was quite a shock, at least it was for me. I came through Christianity first, and then I came through the Theosophical Society, and then I came through the goodwill organisations. And always there was a concept at the core of the teachings, soul and the sense of self. And also in the Theosophical teachings there was a great reverence for the Gautama Buddha. And so when I came across this concept, I got quite a shock of what is this all about. So I started searching and looking at what people had written. I read about what DK said about it, and I've got his paragraphs in the talk. But I had to satisfy it for myself. I had to really go and search to really try and understand. And this presentation is a summary of what I found, and I hope that it's meaningful for you and explains a few things just like it did for me. So in the theme of the talk, just highlighting some of the differences, I'm going to show firstly some of the laws in Buddhism and Occultism that are absolutely parallel, and then also I'll be looking at the two concepts that are different. I'm going to start the talk. It's very colourful with some beautiful paintings. I'm sorry, I don't know the author. If you haven't seen them, when you see them, they're just gorgeous. I got them off the internet. And I couldn't find the author of the painter's name, so they're anonymous, but I'm going to start the little pictorial show of Buddha's life. You all know the story, but I had to include these gorgeous pictures. So the esoteric wisdom tells us that the universe is a manifestation of a building potential. And when it's not a manifestation, it's known by many, many names, and I've just gathered a few here. The absolute, the immutable, space, emptiness, Paradharman, Paranirvana, and the boundless and sacredness is another name. Emptiness, I've got that there. These are all names that are given to this great building potential, this building consciousness, Blavatsky called it, prior to manifestation. And then, according to the laws of nature, this potential cycles regularly in and out of incarnations. So just as we have regular incarnations as souls incarnating, so do these great universal lords and lives. And when the great life is in manifestation, we call it by various names depending upon which level it's known as. So we have names like Universal Mind, Brahman, Logos, and as we go down through the layers, we have then Spirit, we have Soul. But all these are different names which we have applied to this dwelling sacredness within us. And all different names, but ultimately these names are just describing this great universal boundless life at the various levels of manifestation. The Logos of a system that guides the spiritual evolution of all lives within its field via avatars or spiritual messengers. And an avatar is, I've got a couple of quotes here because it really tidied up my understanding. An avatar is really just a beam, an energy beam of the deity, of the great consciousness. An avatar is a ray that comes forth from that great manifestation, and we call that an avatar. And there are different avatars at different levels, but two of the two greatest who have come from humanity are Gautama Buddha and Jesus Christ. And Buddha is a transmitting avatar of wisdom, and Christ is a transmitting avatar of love. And so when humanity was ready to receive these great gifts from our presiding deity, he sent forth an avatar, he sent forth Buddha, and he sent forth Christ to teach us wisdom the Buddha, and love, spiritual love with Jesus Christ. The teachings given out by the avatars are all oral, they don't write anything down, and they gather about them disciples who will write them down and disseminate them. And they create the books and the schools through which the teachings will be disseminated. And there is the beginning of the paintings I was talking about. Isn't it beautiful? If anyone ever knows the name of the artist, if really, if you could give it to me, I'd appreciate it. So there symbolically is the great teacher there and teaching his disciples. So wisdom is given out on two levels. We know this. There is the exoteric level, which is given out for those who are not conscious of that sacredness within, aren't consciously working to invoke that sacredness within. And then the esoteric teachings are given out for those who have become self-aware. We all know this. And this is the root cause for different levels of teaching which are given out, just as we would not expect a child in kindergarten to go through the curriculum of a university, then neither would we expect the same for those who are on the ordinary way, I call it, or the ordinary path, and those who have stepped onto the path. And the path has many names. We call it the path of discipleship is the name that I like to use. And this also does have some bearing on the disparity between the know God and accept God schools of thought. Man takes the teachings of the avatar, puts his layer of thought forms over it, and in time the pure thought of the avatar can become degraded. And so that's when we get people arguing about sacred concepts that really are inclusive and embrace all. It is man that argues when he tries to understand and tries to claim ownership of a thought form, to attach to a thought form. Therefore, if someone disagrees with your thought form because you're attached to it, in that consciousness you have to fight to defend it. And we know in the history of Christianity that ruled by Neptune and Mars, that Tibetans said ruled by blood, ruled by Mars, because humanity is too attached to their thought forms of their God, their belief, and that's so they kill each other in defense of the love of God. God loves me. I'll kill you if you don't accept what I say or believe what I say. A brief overview of Siddhartha's early life. And here they have just set up Kamala, that's supposed to be. And DK said that Buddha and Christ were brothers. They took the third initiation together. There's some wonderful images on internet. I call that a Fosmet and the others of Buddha and Christ together, standing together. There are a lot of wonderful footprints out there and images showing the closeness of these top-grade avatars. As we know, Siddhartha was born into a royal household. What a special child. It was foreordained his birth, and there is a beautiful painting showing the baby Siddhartha and as a child growing up. Siddhartha married and had a child, and I pondered that, and I thought that is what disciples are asked to do. And marry and have children, just as Christ came to take the path of initiation. And when you're entering onto that path, it is expected that you would have raised your sacral energy up to this way, celebrates it to heart, and so we find the celibacy starting to come in. And it is appropriate for those who are really on that inner work, true initiates on the path, and I believe that's why Jesus Christ demonstrated his celibate life and the time of Buddha apparently allegedly made. That's right. Thank you. So there is another beautiful painting of Gautama and his marriage there. But then came the foreordained repudiation of his personal life and dedication to the mission which he was born to carry out. And in that painting, as you can see, all the suffering behind him. And one of the popular stories that goes around is how he climbed over the wall of his father's temple, palace, and saw all the suffering for the first time. Whether that is true or not, I don't believe that was exactly true. He was an avatar who came for a mission, but the story is beautiful, and I think that painting is quite lovely and depicts that. And he received his training in Brahmanical secret schools whose roots were founded in pre-Vedic wisdom. So he really did learn a lot from the Brahmins who were teaching at the time. From these Indian sages, he learned the truths of emptiness, the impermanence of material life, and spiritual development techniques. And there I have a picture of an old Indian sage. And eventually Siddhartha reasoned his way to enlightenment, and that's quite a magnificent painting. You can see the great cobra of wisdom, the snake rising up behind him, symbolizing the rising, well, it's the Kundalini energy rising up, and quite a magnificent and beautiful painting there. Gautama Buddha came to prepare the way for Christ, and his role was to give out the teachings according to DK, which would help humanity and the advanced aspects to reach the point of accepted discipleship. Of course, there were many that would have gone past there, but that was his role. He came as a forerunner to the Christ, and I believe in my studies, and I've put this in my book, I believe that His Holiness Dalai Lama has come to play a similar role as a forerunner for the reappearance of the Christ. And there's a similar parallel, of course, with this. And there's a beautiful painting of Gautama teaching and preparing his disciples to take the path of discipleship and to preparing them for when Christ would come in. And thus began the great Buddhist path of spiritual development. This is quite good. This is at Dharamshala. Isn't that amazing that when I came across it on YouTube, I thought, oh, that's just incredible, the drums and everything. So now 6 Buddhist and 6 occult laws that are at one for you to read, and I'm accompanying this slide with really beautiful chant, Metta or Loving Kindness chant sung by Allah or you may know it. So I'll just go back. I think the sound needs to go up a bit maybe. Yeah, okay. So there, may all beings be free from enmity and danger, be free from mental suffering, be free from physical suffering, may they take care of themselves happily. This is a beautiful heart chakra chant. So I'll let you read, there are 6 laws, and I'll just let you read and enjoy the music. So here we have a summary of those we have covered. So here we have 6 laws, and there were others, but these are the ones that I thought were important in Buddhism. And in my search in Blavatsky's writings and in details found the parallels to them. There's no difference between those major laws. And I have coming up for you, now we're going to go into the no God belief and the no soul. And I've got 2 videos from Buddhists who are giving their point of view, and I thought it would explain much better about the concept of it rather than I could. So see what you think. So the first one, the no God belief, there is no God, no creator at work in the universe. That is what Buddha taught. And here we have Dennis Lindwood.
Basic ways does Buddhism differ from other Western religions?
Well, other Western religions, presumably one means simply Christianity and Judaism. Perhaps one can also add Islam, because it is Middle Eastern. It's not fully Far Eastern, one might say. All these religions are theistic. They all believe in a personal God, a God who is the creator of the universe and who governs the universe with his providence. I think to someone coming newly to Buddhism, the first thing that strikes them is the, to them purely negative fact, that in Buddhism there is no personal God. Some people very welcome this. I myself welcomed this because I never had believed in God. So when I discovered that in Buddhism there was no God, I was overjoyed. But some people, on discovering that in Buddhism there is no God, are rather dismayed. Even people who are otherwise sympathetic to Buddhism. And sometimes they try to smuggle him in. And they say, well, the Buddha may not have believed in a personal God, but he must have believed in an impersonal God. But actually in the Buddhist scriptures, there's no basis for that sort of assertion at all. And we therefore feel, most Buddhists feel that man's need, for God or a God is not a real, not a genuine need. You start feeling that the need for God or a God when you just feel your own inadequacy, and when you can't really believe in yourself, you can't believe in your own capacity for development, you don't believe in your own worth. And honestly, quite a few people who come along to us in the West and become interested in our movement, that is to say, in the Friends of the Western Buddhist Order, which I started in 1967, come crippled with emotions of inadequacy and guilt and unworthiness, which very, very often are directly traceable to a Christian upbringing. So in Buddhism, we don't have a God. There's no God. The Buddha doesn't take the place of God.
So very interesting. So the gist of the no God objection is that it introduces interference into an orderly universe. There is no superhuman consciousness and creative power at work in the universe, and to worship such a being is foolish, and Buddha said so, according to Zen. And it personalizes and worships emptiness and the natural laws of nature as if they are a god, Brahman, with supernatural powers. And these are just attitudes and concepts that I've picked up from various Buddhists, and there's a whole range of different attitudes out there. So much of this is risen from the exoteric description of God in the Old Testament. God is a jealous God. God told the Israelites to kill their enemies, but essentially most Buddhists deny that there is a superconscious state of existence in the universe, believing that Gautama taught this. And now we come to the no soul belief. There is no self, no At-One, no soul. That is what Buddha said. And I have a really good video. I think some of the ideas are really spot on, I think, and see what you think of this one. It is...
Up until you see beyond it, everything is dominated by oneself, is it not? I want to be awakened, I want to be enlightened, I want to have some spiritual revelation, which is really no different than I want an ice cream cone. I want to be loved. I want to be agreed with. I want to be disagreed with. I like or I don't like. You see how the fiction of self always keeps itself in the center of one's consciousness. Okay? And spiritual awakening is seeing through the fiction of that actually there isn't actually a self in the center of one's consciousness. That's what this term that I use, that a lot of people don't like or it frightens them, emptiness means. Empty of self. Full of reality, absolutely full of the divine, but empty of self. Of course, self wants it both ways. Huh? It wants to have the divine, but make sure I'm here. You experience it. And if you experience it, then it wants to make sure it's there to try to maintain that experience. But anybody in this room who had even a glimpse of an awakening to real reality, well, one of the hallmarks is the absence of self. That's the beauty of it. And most human beings, most of us are so deeply in a trance state that it's even hard to consider what you would be, that you could be something other than a self. Think of yourself as something other than a self. If you really want to confuse yourself, just try. What could I be other than a self? Whether it's an enlightened self, or a little ordinary human self, or a super self, or a good self, or a bad self, or you see what I mean? A self that's in heaven or hell or enlightened or unenlightened. All of that is just more self-seeking. See? And it's really, we're so encultured into this that it's almost impossible for most people's minds to actually think of themselves, what they could be, the reality of them in any other terms other than a self. That's how complete the fiction has become.
So here is the gist of the no soul, anatta or At-One-Ment doctrine. There is no soul or self. People are an association of skandhas. David would know how that's pronounced. That fly apart at death. The skandhas are firm feeling sensations, perception thoughts. These lead to will and action, resulting in karma and consciousness. And so these fly apart at death, and there is no continuation, apart from mind and karma. It continues on from life to life, but something that is a body of wisdom and that evolves through lives. Generally, in this, people who accept the anatta or At-One doctrine, they do not accept that. It is the mind that reincarnates, say some. When one dies, the mind continues in another form. We're talking about lower mind here, not higher mind, soul mind, and that we're talking about lower mind. But no metaphysical entity, no soul, and no kind of spiritual self continues from one existence to another is a common theme in people who think like that. Reality is not a self, it is being empty of self, and that's just an indulgence on the right. That little thing. And now I've got the 5 sutras most often cited as evidence for no God or no soul, and I've accompanied this with some of the paintings by Roerich. Such beauty he did. So these are the sutras that this researcher came up over and over again as evidence for no soul, and see what you think of these. The first one, anatta, what does anatta mean? Buddha said, form is not the soul. Sensations are not the soul. Perceptions are not the soul. Assemblages are not the soul. Consciousness is not the soul. And when you compare that list to the skandhas, you will see that he was talking, it would appear, about the skandhas. So he didn't actually say that the soul did not exist. He was talking about what soul was not. And that seems to be a very common thread in these sections that are being quoted. He's talking about what soul is not, it appears, to me at least. Then the second one, Buddhas have said, monks, firm feeling, perception, consciousness, all these are not self. Is that which is impermanent, painful and subject to change fit to be regarded as myself? No, any kind of form, whether gross or subtle, must be regarded as not myself. Once again, careful phrasing and only saying what the soul was not. This is my favourite. I don't know how it's pronounced. Vajrayana was a wanderer, they called him, and asked Gautama to explain about the cosmos, soul, mind, body, and life after death. And Buddha refused to answer, said that there are questions best left alone. This is a really important one, I think, because it really explains and gives insight into the approach and the teachings that Buddha gave out, and that there are some questions that lead to an unresolvable thicket of views which will cause suffering and distress if investigated. And we only have to look through the wars and battles that have taken place through time in Christianity to see the truth of that. And but I love that Vajrayana, they talk about them and describe them in different ways, and it seemed to be, you could see them as maybe these people like butterflies that hop from one group to another and ask these questions and hop on. At least that's one version that I saw when I was meditating on this. He was probably a very serious student, but anyway. So Buddha refused to answer metaphysical questions. The next one, Buddha. Surely to hold views such as after death I will be constant, permanent, eternal, not subject to change, I will stay just like that for an eternity, isn't it utterly and completely a fool's teaching? And that's it. And Buddhist interpretation of that is only fools believe in soul or Atman. So that comment comes up quite often, foolish, being foolish or whatever. So Buddha only said that the self was not an eternal or permanent state, and occultists agree with that, have no argument with that. And this is the long one. Mahamati was very evolved, and he was asking of Buddha, Buddha nature, Dhammakaya, is eternal, unchanging. Is this the same as the soul substance taught by the philosophers, the divine At-One-Ment, eternal, inscrutable, unchanging, imperishable? Buddha said that all such notions as causation, succession, that make up personality, personal soul, supreme spirit, sovereign God, creator, are all figments of the imagination. No, Buddhahood is not the same as the philosophers' At-One-Ment. Now, in my research, I think the early Greeks were giving their philosophy out, and they were teaching the immortality of soul. So I think that it could be related to that, and I have it there. And it should not be read out of this context, because later in the same sutra, the experts say that Buddha talks of the reality of the pure self Atman, equating it with potential Buddhahood. So in that same sutra you have differences of opinion, and this has caused much debate amongst Buddhists of the different schools, arguing about what Buddha really meant and what he was trying to say. The sutra most usually cited as evidence for self is the Nirvana Sutra, Mahaparinirvana Sutra. And one site said allegedly it was given out on the last day of Buddha's life, and that it was only for the esoteric students, is the opinion that I got. And there are so many jewels and gems in that sutra which really do exalt self with earnest, and there is one of them, and this is my favourite one. Those who, desirous of attaining reality, cultivate the self, Atman, the eternal bliss and the pure, this will bring forth the jewel, just like that wise person who obtained the genuine priceless gem rather than worthless detritus misperceived as the real thing. And that is the theme that is carried on and on in that sutra. And there's a Dr. Tony Page, that Nirvana Sutra, I found that very, very helpful, and gives the whole sutra, and you can go through and read it if you're inclined to. Buddhists such as the Dalai Lama, they acknowledge that some Buddhists acknowledge self, but what they interpret as self, His Holiness said, can be interpreted other ways. So it's just a matter of interpretation. Some Buddhists interpret certain words one way and some another way, and that was a quote from His Holiness, which I thought I'd add. That was his comment on that. So the no-self belief is entrenched in mainstream Buddhism, deliberately cultivated by Gautama. So why did he do this? So I'm getting to the gist of why I think he did it, and see what you think of these points. I've got 4 points here. Because of the need of the time, the level of mental development of the masses. Remember, this was 2,500 years ago. It wasn't wholesale education. And I think that the great one, the blessed one, came in and really wanted a doctrine that people could use, and people who did not have the education that was really just being taught in the spiritual temples, or perhaps the aristocracy were also getting an education, but the general population were not being educated. And Gautama came for the people. He came for, as Christ did, came to help ordinary men. Because of religious corruption was another reason, in the more exoteric methods of prayer and of aligning with deity. In the old days, you had to go through a priest. And that even today, there are many Christians, fundamentalist Christians, I understand, who feel that they have to go through their chaplain or their priest in order to reach God. I think that Buddha really wanted to avoid that. There was corruption around. There wasn't the network going on, so we could all understand if someone did something bad over here. We know about it over here today, and immediately, there was nothing like that back then. So I believe that he probably wanted to cut out corruption, religious corruption. And he came also, DK said, to prepare humanity for discipleship. And so that's another reason why the general tone and tenor of his teaching, I think that's something that we have to consider. And then who was energetically? Why did he take this approach? And I started thinking of the ways, and I've also been working on this astrology chart, and I will show you the speculative chart. And the information, the date I selected came from the Theosophical Glossary, because there's a whole range of dates given by everybody. And so I went there, and the actual date puts it about 600 years before Jesus. And we know that's supposed to be 500 years that he came before Jesus. But I stayed with this, and I did some transit and progression work, and the date really works. It really does work. So there is a chart I've come up with, and it really is a beautiful description of his life. We have all this Taurus. Buddha is a messenger who brought illumination to the world. Taurus is a sign of illumination. It had to be the stories tell us that he was born at a Taurus full moon. And we have a Taurus full moon in that chart. We know that he was the prince of Aurora, and there up in the 10th, all that light around the 10th house, which is the house of the ruler, that really fits his life in that. And over in the 7th house, we have Neptune, the sign of the planet of sacrifice. He sacrificed his personal life. And down the bottom we have Scorpio. And the moon represents humanity, and Scorpio is a sign of suffering beyond every other sign. And there Buddha came to save suffering humanity. And there is humanity down there, the moon chart. I put Cancer on the ascendant because in The Light of Asia by Sir Edward Arnold, he said something that when he was born, the crab was conjunct the sun. And I thought I had to get Cancer in there somewhere, so I wanted the Sun in Taurus, and so I fiddled around with a Cancer ascendant, and it really seemed to fit. I'm not saying that this is the chart, but it is a chart that seems to work, so I went with that. Now, DK said that he had Gautama had a soul on the second ray wisdom line, and he was working through a ray 1 personality. And that makes him pretty hard line, because the wisdom line, I think I've got the quote later, DK said that they go to Shambhala, where the willow eventually, in they are different. That path of wisdom is different to the path of love. And with the fact that he had a ray 1 personality, I think that this really coloured his approach and the way he taught. And so we have ray 1. Vulcan is the higher ruler, brings through as a soul energy and spiritual energy through Taurus, and it is a ray 1 planet. It is the only sacred planet that carries the pure higher ray 1 force. Pluto is the only other planet that carries it, but it is a non-sacred planet and brings through, it stimulates the aggressive, cruel side of ray 1 and man, whereas Vulcan stimulates the higher sacred ray 1 energy. So there's the chart, and for anyone who'd like to work on it, if there are any comments about it in the astrologers, I'd really welcome some feedback on that. And I thought I'd do some Sabian symbols. I've been working with them a lot lately, and because you can get such insight. For those who went at the astrology workshop, Dane Roger, who was a disciple of DK's, was so entranced with the Sabian symbols that he asked the author of them if he could put his own interpretation on them. And so I started to work with them, and I think they give a really interesting insight to astrology. And the ascendant point, as we know, is really important. It is the sole purpose point. I see it as the eastern point in the chart because it's where the sun is rising. If you're a Mason, you know that the eastern point is really important in the chart. And I see that in my meditations as a doorway into the higher realms, certainly energetically through the chakras. And so the degree on that ascendant is really important. And the 28 Cancer is an Indian girl introduces her boyfriend to the tribe. The ascendant girl was a messenger. She came and she was introducing one culture to another, one level of understanding to another. It really does fit, I think, quite beautiful. And I see they're introducing the teachings, the divine teachings to humanity. That was his purpose. He comes through as a very nurturing sign, so he came to nurture the people, to save the people, to lift them. By the way, his holiness is a Cancerian, so there's a real link there as well. And so he came to embrace them and lift them and bring in the new teachings of wisdom and introduce them to humanity. Aquarius, fire of Aquarius, that's where Neptune is. Neptune is the symbol of the Christ. A council of ancestors implementing the efforts of a young leader, and in this case the ancestors is deity. This is deity coming through, supporting the young leader through there. This is Gautama, and supporting the efforts of this wonderful young leader, old soul aspect of himself. There we see that message entailed or in that Neptune symbol there. And what have we got here? Moon and siblings. The moon is humanity. Look what we've got. We've got years down here that shatters the form. We've got, this is spirit here, but it's in the sign of Scorpio. And the symbol is a pregnant woman. And you get the real sense there of there's something that is needing to be birthed. You get there the sense of the great pain of the birth as well. And of course, Scorpio is the sign in the lower aspect that is represented by the Hydra. And if anyone has read the myth of Hercules, I mean, it's a real diabolical beast in that. And it stays right around until the third initiation, actually enlightenment. The dweller stays around and is not defeated until the enlightenment initiation, third degree in our lineage there. So I really feel that that's symbolic and does really, a lot of information can be drawn and extracted from that degree of Scorpio for humanity. And Gemini, Venus is in Gemini, and the way I look at astrology and the way my teacher taught me originally was when you go around the chart from the bottom and you go around this way, the last planet really has a special message in some way. So in this case, it really, really is important because Gemini is the messenger. Gemini and any sign was a messenger. Gautama Buddha was an avatar, a messenger on a very high level, but he was here to bring the message of wisdom. Venus represents love, wisdom. Love, wisdom flows through Venus. And in the 11th house of Boots, Buddha came to teach discipleship. He was the messenger, and he was gathering together disciples who would carry out the teachings in preparation for the Christ who would come 500 years later. So there is a little bit of interpreting the chart with Sabian symbols. So Gautama said that the 1-2B way combination is distinguished by simplicity and a direct approach to truth. Obstacles are destroyed with will. And here's a direct quote. Simplicity opens the way into Shambhala. Souls on the wisdom aspect of the second way go to Shambhala, the center where the will of God is known, and such a one is the Buddha. But the Buddha's method based on emptiness is mirrored by the Vedanta-Jnana Yoga. And this is what led me really to make the link between, because I have been practicing this form of yoga. I'd studied Raja Yoga and then I followed this, and I thought it's just the same teaching. You know, and I studied Ramana Maharshi, and he says, you know, says, ask yourself, who am I? And then answer after self-observing, not this or not that. And you keep going back, and it's just saying, we could say, well, this is another form of emptiness, and I just know the direct link. There's no difference in those two paths, and we know in Vedanta that the whole religion is spiritual teaching is really based on a sense of self and of soul. But here they are teaching in this branch of yoga a form of emptying yourself, which is the Buddhist method. And it really is a well-run will and power method of approach. It was taught by Sankaracharya, and Blavatsky said reincarnated Buddha. It came 50 years later to make corrections, she said, to some of the teachings. This is my personal opinion now, you may agree or disagree with me. The shortcoming in this Buddhist method, in my opinion, is that it omits the glory and sacredness of deity that inspires and uplifts. And I'll get a quote from Blavatsky later. And technically, the gradual bridge-building effort from ignorance to enlightenment, evolving soul across lives, is omitted. The no-self Buddhist view appears to teach that everyone is capable of making the leap from absolute ignorance to enlightenment in one life. And I think that is quite distressing for people. I've had people come to me for counselling. This one woman, she and her husband were Buddhists, and they were training themselves and applying disciplines to reach enlightenment, and she was most distressed because her husband was really advancing and she wasn't, she felt, and she was distraught and she was in depression, and she says, no matter how hard I try, I can't match where he is. And so I gave her my impression or my view of the evolution of the soul, and it helped her. She went away comforted with that. What she made of that, I don't know, because I didn't see her again. She never came back. But that is just one of the things that I filed away. So when I was doing my paper on this, I remembered that. And there are some Buddhists that say there are three main cosmological realms, many sub-realms, and nirvana after all. And I've got the Buddhist view. It's here on the right. The form world, desire world, formless worlds with nirvana, and I see we have the equivalent formless worlds over here, mental, Buddhic, atmic planes. So that's just a little thing that I put in there. HPP, Helena Blavatsky, said that the doctrine without soul was never correctly understood and misguided immature minds into believing there was nothing more. The metaphysics of Gautama, which, stripped in their exoteric garb of every soul, vivifying hope, transcendental aspiration and symbol, appear in their cold wisdom like crystalline icicles, the skeletons of the primeval truths of esoteric philosophy. Quite harsh, but she was Roman, very Roman. 50 years later, Gautama returned as Sankaracharya to amend the teachings. He was the father of Vedanta, whose philosophy, according to Blavatsky, was midway between the metaphysics of the Brahmins and Buddhism. DK said both schools are right. Here's our teacher. There is a God transcendent. Behind the manifested universe stands a sacred formless one. The Buddhist is right not to personalize divinity. There is the sacred God immanent, whose life is the source of life in all kingdoms and nature. There is likewise in every human being a transcendent soul, which, when the life cycle on earth has come and gone, becomes again the unmanifest and formless. He also said that Christians are also right in their Father, Son, Holy Spirit theology, which disappears also into the One when the period of manifestation is over. And he also said it helps the human mind to recognize the conditioning divine life to speak of God as a person of His will, His nature, and His form. So it's a helpful tool, but not to be taken literally in the whole span of evolution. All agree there is one sacred reality, and the goal is to become one with that reality. There is no argument there. There is disagreement in the interpretation of that reality and the means to arrive at it. But the no God and God paths are simply, in my opinion, two sides of the same coin. No God, the world method promotes the notion of becoming an empty vessel for sacredness. God embracing the love method promotes the notion of filling oneself up with sacredness. One path says empty yourself with sacredness, the other path says fill yourself with that sacredness. The world type way one sees directly to the essence, identifying with that. I am the one. All that is not of the essence is dynamically repelled. Let me be empty, destruction before beauty. They go like this. Row 1. Row 2, the love type magnetically go within. Row 2 goes through life like this. They're inclusive. Row 1 goes through like that. The two different paths, you can really see the two different ways operating through the different systems there. And so the love type magnetically gathers in, and they are instructed to look to me with the eyes of love. Seek the path leading from the outer circle form to the point. They are told to seek the path, to seek God through form. Row 1 types, empty yourself. Look straight to the essence and find the essence of all. And so here we have the path of Buddha, row 1, be empty for sacredness. The path of the Christ and occultists, row 2, be full of sacredness. There is but one sacred life. There is no argument in that. When Brahman is in residence, I choose to use that word, then scattered fragments of consciousness in the universe believe they exist and are self, soul and spirit, and this is as it should be. Life is seeking form experience. Life, Brahman, deity, emptiness, whatever you want to call it, is seeking form experience. We would not be here, we would not be in incarnation if a great being wasn't seeking some sort of experience of it. And we are its eyes and ears, and we are its experience. We are God. God is within us, deity is within us, emptiness is within us, that's sacredness, whatever you want to call it. Ultimately, that sacredness is within us all, and we are its eyes and ears, and it is having an experience. We are having an experience. We are the cutting edge, I like to think, of deity's emptiness's experience in the universe. It's us having this experience. In our world, we are required to struggle and fight our way to enlightenment, and overcoming self-delusion is part of the curriculum. The only real argument, I think, which Buddhists have, and I stand to be corrected, is that no form in the universe is permanent. When you really boil it down, I think it just comes down to that, and the occultists exactly agree with that. At the end of it all, after form realizes it is personality, and personality realizes it is soul, and soul realizes it is spirit, and spirit realizes it is monad. When self-realization is complete, both Buddhists and occultists agree on the end of the end result. And if the details are not quibbled over, there is really no argument. We're just quibbling about the path to how to get to the end result. As a Buddhist said to me, there are as many saints in Vedanta or Christianity as there are in Buddhism, and I thought that was a really beautiful thought that he came out with. You argue about the path and the details, men are arguing about the form, and if they could just get through and just look at the sacredness beyond, there would be no argument. But we're so full of ego, so full of self, all we can see is what's in front of us. And what I really love about Buddhist training and Vedanta training and the occult training, it's all about the mind and it's all about perception. And we know that Blavatsky said the mind is the slave of the real. You know, that's so true. If you're attached to your thought form, if your thoughts are an extension of your ego, that's what you'll see, that's what you'll create, and that's what you'll fight for, and that's what you'll die for. And we know that to be true. All are absorbed and resolved back into the one, and closing the universe, the unmanifest period begins. And so after we have all, after self-realization is complete, all are drawn and absorbed back into that great life, and then the prolaic period begins, a period of rest and that. This is going through a lot faster than I thought. The seemingly contrary paths are unconnected in the natural world. Opposites exist only in relation to each other. And once again, we come up with the ray force symbol and the yin-yang, and so beautiful. And in this case, I think that perhaps the black aspect of the yin-yang could be the Buddha's path, the ray one path, and the other could be the path of Christ and the love path. And I think that they absolutely perfectly fit together and cater for the different consciousnesses that are attracted either to this path or to that path. Right through the third, because we work with the Trinity always, and I was thinking, well, where does row 3 fit into it? And I thought, yes, if you come through the Buddhist stream, but you're really a row 2 type, row 3 enables you to adapt your consciousness so that you can work through that path. Likewise, if you're an occultist and you find that you're drawn more to the Buddhist path or the row 1 path, such as I am, then you can make that adaptation and follow the path which is right for you. Really, as you advance along the path, and you all know this, all the differences disappear and you just see the similarities. You can make adjustment and be here or there because the truth is just the same. You've got rid of all the rubbish and all the argument in between. And I can be this, I can be a Buddhist, I can be an occultist, I can be a Christian. And as long as we stay true to that sacredness and we're following those inclusive laws and those great laws of compassion, there is no argument. No. So when all opposites are seen as being complementary, then time is not, and the sacredness which stands behind all is revealed. There is the formless. I've played, the music is still playing, and that is the unmanifest period that's supposed to symbolize. Together, the no-self and self paths, the Buddhist and the Christ occult paths, give a complete and perfect picture of the path of enlightenment, in my opinion. All true paths, such as the 8 Noble Truths of Buddhism, which teach the 8 means of Raja Yoga, the 10 Commandments of the Bible, lead to sacredness when the mind is purified, correct spiritual disciplines are applied, and required qualities of selflessness, harmlessness, and compassion are developed. Thank you. Sorry, when I did it at home, it took up the whole period of time, but we had calling around and questions and discussion. So, yes.
This was really good, and I was thinking of it.
This was wonderful, Leoni. Thank you. And when we were talking about how Buddha put everything in the soul is not this or that, well, then what does that make us think of? And as Buddhist students, we think of ourselves really, with his that I want the physical body and the emotions are not there. So this negation of what we really are leaves open for us intuitively to figure out what we are. So I was thinking about that. The other thing I would ask you, and these things are very data with me about this, in Buddhism, the big point is to achieve enlightenment. So we're always trying to correlate that with Bailey and occult perspective. So you offer that interesting idea, I think, you're saying that enlightenment to you meant third degree.
Yes, it's really interesting. I think that the enlightenment in Buddhists is a lot higher than that. And so, because they talk about nirvana, they've got the problem with nirvana in all different levels as well. You know, nirvana, like Devachan is a nirvana. And I think that the state that we consider to be nirvana goes beyond our system. But I equate the nirvana that is spoken of with probably the monadic level.
Mm-hmm. Well, in a lot of times when we're looking at third degree, we say that there's like 75% redemption and so forth. So there still is work to be done as we move to the first degree when that's done. So, so you're thinking, well, if you were to equate, and let's just talk about basic enlightenment from the Buddhists, because obviously that can continue in a broader way. But what would you say would be for someone, the Buddhist approach? What would enlightenment, when it's first achieved, how would you equate that? To what degree?
I think there is a sliding scale in enlightenment, but they do talk about reaching nirvana. David probably could give a better answer on this than I could. But I see it as a sliding scale. However, we do know that in occultism, enlightenment is the soul has flooded the consciousness, so the ego is not there anymore, and there are still some levels to develop further, because it's only at the fourth initiations that all the vehicles are cut away, and one has become really monadically aligned at that point. So they skip all these stages of development that we usually work with. So I have put it at the monadic level, and I've got some quotes, I haven't got them here, but I really think that when they're talking about nirvana, there is a monadic level. However, that's when you reach that level, there are no attributes, and you can't sort of come back. I think there is a sliding scale in there, and I'm sorry I can't be more specific right at this time.
Yeah. Well, and certainly there's the Sutra approach, which is the slow, gradual Buddhist approach, and there's the Tantra. And the Tantra, which talks about achieving enlightenment in a lifetime. Of course, we haven't talked about the preparation of previous lives. We really up to that one lifetime. But in any event, with that, I was thinking about when we talk about in the Buddha tradition taking many initiations in one life. But it seems like that we're thinking the same thing, that the area has to be part of the aspect of expression with enlightenment.
Yes, generally in DK's teaching, the enlightenment is equated with a third, but he's talking to us, disciples. I'm sure that term can be used and is used on higher levels as well. The ultimate enlightenment, you could say, for our system is monadic consciousness, is just a word. But enlightenment really is an expansion of light, an expansion of wisdom, really. So there's a great measure at the third initiation. We would say, Buddhists might say, yes, there is a great measure there, but when you get to be bodhisattva and beyond, there is even more dhammakara, I say, wisdom that comes through.
Could I ask you, David, because you do so much really good comparing of Buddhism, what do you think?
Well, I would agree with what Leoni said. I would have to agree that enlightenment in Buddhism would be largely monadic, but also a sliding scale, because we read about the Buddha took the sixth initiation in his lifetime, 600 BCE. So, but there's initiations beyond that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Or anything you'd like to share from it, because we've still got 10 minutes. What did you think of the music? What about the one at the end? That is an Australian group, and that's I think it's called Infinity. You can buy it on internet, and they are local. They are in Masonry. Actually, they're part of Keats people, but they put out this, and that is just beautiful. That chant at the end is just wonderful, and there are other wonderful chants on it as well. So that's available. I think it's called Infinity. And if that's not correct and you would like it and you can't get hold of it, email me and I'll send it to you. But I just love that piece. I'll sit and play that to myself and watch that. Yeah. Any other question? Yes?
One of the things I noticed when you had his chart up there,
Yeah, the astrologers like comments on the chart.
One of the things I noticed when the chart was up there was the kite and the planets that were involved in the kite. And the kite, to me, always in an astrological chart, reminds me of the hierarchy chart that they had at the beginning of initiation, human, and solar. And his particular planets involved in that, it was the ascendant in Cancer, which of course is his soul, and Pluto, which is going inward to uncover the light of what's inside. Then it was the sun, and I believe it was Mercury.
There's the kite. So there's the kite there, and there's the tail of it going down there.
And then it goes down, and the tail of it goes down to the earth, which is where he came. And of course, now he is the representative there for us in the hierarchy in this chart. It shows up here as the gift to the earth. I mean, I just thought that was very representative.
I actually progressed the chart for astrologers, and because the Theosophical Glossary also gave the dates and times for when he left home and when he reached enlightenment, and I progressed them forward, and they really do. It's like it resonates. It's very, very well. And for those who are interested, I have written a book, and these are in it. And also the child, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, on lineage through astrology, but they're all being sold at the moment. But if you contact me and like a book, that's it. So I've got this in it, but I just think that's quite beautiful. What is really wonderful about when you compare Buddha's chart with Christ is Buddha really came out to be a messenger, to be out there in the world and to have a long life. One of the things that when you've got a lot of energy, because the chart really starts at birth and you work around it, it's like ages. He was meant to live a long time. His mission was meant to be a long time. I think he died in his 80s. Stand to be correct to be. Whereas Jesus, all his energy was in the second half here. He had a short lifespan, but he taught so much. But there we have this great blaze of glory in the house of rulers and that. So he was the prince. He was meant to come and be born as a prince. Any other thoughts on that, Bea? Yes, Susan.
Speaking of His Holiness, and I've really appreciated your viewpoint of taking opposites like soul and no soul and finding a reconciliation point. And this is something that His Holiness does repeatedly. When I was at a teaching His Holiness gave on the Heart Sutra, he got together with Islamic leaders and they debated the Buddhist concept of reincarnation and karma as compared to one life and last judgment. And we came to a Buddhist Islamic accord, and the book's been written about it and all the different things. This is just one example. And the accord that they reached was that we are accountable for our actions in this life. And all of a sudden, reincarnation, one life, last judgment, karma, all of that faded because they found how they're saying exactly the same thing with different metaphors.
And thank you for sharing that. And of course, His Holiness, I believe, is an initiate, and a lot of others too, probably around the 4th degree initiate, very, very advanced. And as I said before, and I don't know what you think, I believe that he's coming as a forerunner for the reappearance of the Aquarian Christ. And I also think that perhaps the reason why he was forced out of Tibet was so that he would come on the world stage. He's done such amazing work, and I was thinking when you're talking, it's because of his consciousness is so inclusive. And yes, people, of course, they would find reconciliation because they're held in that inclusive consciousness which lifts us all up, and all our divisions and willingness to fight or wantingness to fight really disappears. So I'm not supposed I would think that everywhere His Holiness goes that he would have the same effect. There would be peace for him because his consciousness is so evolved. And I don't know if there is anyone else on the planet who is visibly taking a high public role that is playing quite that role. I think the Holiness is doing that. Any other questions? Did you enjoy it?
Yes.
Good. Well, thank you. Thank you.